I'm opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another dissection. This time, The Amazing Spider-Man 2, also known as The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Rise of Electro.
Yes.
I am Phil Svitek, joined alongside Dimitri Panos.
Hello, movie fans.
John Comerford.
Hello, everybody.
And we have, in the booth, Marissa Serafini.
What's up, guys?
Voice of reason.
We have a panel of superheroes. The villains have yet to come. Hopefully they won't distract us. Overall impressions of The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Who wants to jump in? Well, okay, so it's the rise of Electro and the quick demise of Electro. I mean, it was, yeah, lots of fun in it. I mean, I could say there's lots of things I liked about it. Ultimately, the story was kind of not there, a little uneven for me, but, you know, kind of a fun movie experience, but not the best.
It seemed, you know, what I was most surprised about, and I'm noticing a lot more and more, there's a lot more build-up in these types of superhero movies.
I don't know why they felt like they needed to do so much expos and so much building, and it was kind of
But
annoying.
I'm noticing that as a trend overall.
Yeah, I don't understand. It was completely unnecessary to a large degree. I don't think it helped the movie. I think it made the movie more labored and burdened, whereas it could have been really a nice, fun, quick ride, and we would have had a blast. But to me, it was just too exhaustive, and it's trying to set up a world that we didn't
That we already knew.
Yeah, that we already knew. And I get it that maybe they're trying to bring people along that don't know the story, but I don't think they didn't need anywhere near as much as they wanted that they put in there. And I just find it ironic that a movie whose one of the major themes of the movie is time, this one has got 20 minutes extra that it doesn't need.
Fair enough, Dimitri.
Roosevelt. Yeah, for me, it's really interesting that for me the strongest, its strengths lie in the love story. Peter Parker.
I think everyone agrees.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's,
so I'm not saying anything.
Out of all the comments and the reception of the movie, that has been the unanimous part.
Everybody talks about their on-screen chemistry being paralleling their off-screen chemistry, and that's great. And it did show up on the screen.
Yeah, no, it shows up on the screen. It's just interesting that that happens to be the strongest part of this movie is like their chemistry, the way that they work together, and that part of the story. The hero part or the villain part of the story, to me, they were caricatures not unlike what we got in the 60s Batman television series, if not worse. They weren't.
Well, at least
so
there you were
fleshed
trying to be with the Batman's, Adam.
Yeah, that was
Batman.
very tongue-in-cheek. But this, I mean, it was very two-dimensional, not fleshed out at all, and it didn't really fully tell that story. And they spent time on stuff they didn't need to spend. It's like, to get rid of that stuff you don't need and give us some characterization for these villains, because it makes the movie much more rich if your hero has to overcome something far more interesting than what we got to see.
Yeah, and I think this movie does prove that it can be a very tough balancing act, because there aren't that many superhero movies that have handled it well. And I'm going to say that, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, the first two, Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, they were able to handle the relationship issue along with building and writing and having great villains. Also, I'll go back to the original Superman. You had a great relationship movie between Lois Lane and Superman, but yet your villains were very strong enough. They lent a credible hurdle for a superhero to get over, yet he was still able to have a feasible, plausible relationship.
Well, to your point, I mean, by the way, fans, we'll go out, and then we'll come back in. We'll
bring it in with some
the
webs.
well will draw us in. I did want to talk about that, but since we're on the subject, the comparison of, obviously you're less than 10 years apart pretty much.
Yeah, how can you not compare it to Raimi's?
And so, obviously the consensus is Spider-Man 1 and 2 the originals were
Sam
great.
Raimi's great. Great superhero
And then
movies.
3 didn't hit so well for fans, and part of that reason was we got too many too many villains and too much going on. And in this regard, if you look at it just from a sheer number standpoint, you have 3 villains that you're kind of dealing with.
And
so it echoes the third one in that respect.
I just think they tried to do way too much, and they didn't need to, because the third movie can handle on its own. But I just thought they tried to shove so much in here that they just missed the boat.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And going back to your point, I always felt, and this I guess started back for me when, you had the Michael Keaton Batman. So you had the Joker, and then Tim Burton does Batman Returns, and you had basically the origin of Catwoman and the Penguin coming in, and that was balanced fairly well. But then when Joel Schumacher took over, but aside from it being so ornate and colorful, let's say, they threw in so many villains that Batman didn't care. It was like as if the studio didn't have enough faith in their superhero.
That's what I think. I think it's because they figure, the next one has to be bigger, crazier, and so they just throw more crap in, rather than make it deeper and richer. If you go that route, I think there's more for people to really sink their teeth into, as opposed to numbers.
Right.
Well, the big thing of the success of Sam Raimi is obviously the relationship with, in that movie, Mary Jane. We'll talk about that, obviously, but it was Peter Parker and Harry. Right, and James Franco's character, and that really got fleshed out, and there was hints of that, but then the switch of going to Green Goblin and discovering that it's actually Peter Parker who's Spider-Man, it happened too quickly. Whereas in the Spider-Man 1 and 2, it really, they fleshed it out.
Yeah, well, it took 3 movies to do it.
So. And it's really interesting too, because where it can be argued that Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, maybe they don't have the on-screen chemistry that Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield have.
That first kiss that's still iconic.
No, I agree. I agree. But some people may argue that Garfield and Stone may have a better chemistry.
I think most people do argue that.
But I felt that the Maguire-Dunst chemistry worked great. I mean, it worked. It served its purpose. I thought they were fantastic together. You're right. The screen where he's upside, the kiss where he's upside down, completely works, and they let the relationship develop. The original, I should say, the Raimi Spider-Man, the first one, ends so, in a sense, tragically, that Peter Parker says, literally dumps her, and it's like, no, we can only be more. It's a sad ending, and and I just recently rewatched it in preparation for this. So, I thought that their chemistry was great too. And some people will argue that Garfield's a better Spider-Man for certain reasons too. And yes, Maguire may have played him a little bit more reserved. He didn't have the quips. And Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man is maybe a little bit more in tune to the books, where he's always saying something funny or whatever. But I don't know. The Raimi to me they're just flushed out.
Let's talk about as objectively as we can.
Sure.
The pros and cons of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man to this one. And for me, what I liked
We're not even using the director's name. We're just saying Raimi.
Mark Webb.
I know, but I think it's funny that's how much that it holds. The Raimi ones, they are an entity, whereas these are Mark Webb.
They're getting that.
I don't think they will.
I don't mean to diss Mark Webb.
No, I'm not saying you're doing it. I'm saying everybody. It's not us, but I think most people are saying the Raimi ones, and these are meh.
But it's funny where Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2, and it was very evident in this one. It really, it doesn't come as so much of a surprise where the love story aspect or the relationship aspect of Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2 is so strong. Being that, knowing that Mark Webb came from 500 Days of Summer, and he's great at setting up relationships, whether they're on or off, and coming back together. That's where his strength lies. Now, I think as a director too, he did set up some great set pieces. I thought the set pieces looked amazing. Large. I saw this again at Cinemark XD, and it was awesome, and they look great. But his strengths totally lie within relationship, and not so much with the fantastical and the villains. And
here's what made I really loved Amazing Spider-Man with the first one, because in many ways it did propel the plot forward. Knowing that I had just seen a trilogy of Spider-Man, I really liked how it got darker. It was different, Andrew Garfield versus Tobey Maguire, and rather than kind of hit the same beats, they hit it differently. And even the line about responsibility and all of that, with great power comes great responsibility. It was handled in a different way, and it tied it back to the father. And so I liked where they were initially setting up, and I feel like in this movie, had they just narrowed it down a little bit, they would have hit the mark a little bit more, and we wouldn't necessarily be comparing it as much to the Sam Raimi one, because I think this one really opened up more than even the first one.
You think this particular Spider-Man
for comparison?
2? Oh, I see what you're saying. Had this been a notch better, we wouldn't even be considering the other one.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have that comparison. It's inevitable, especially so few years apart.
How can you not?
But I think I think unfortunately, from what I've been reading, the comparison seems to be Amazing Spider-Man 2 to Spider-Man 3. And but I like, it was because I didn't want it to be a whole again beat by beat, and so I do like Andrew Garfield being a little bit different. He's got in the first one he's got the shaggy hair, and now he's kind of he's toned it down a little bit. They give him a different style and different look, but I like him kind of being the skateboarder, comic-y guy.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah. I like that they reinvented it that way. I think that's perfect.
And again, I would say that it's not necessarily a reinvention. It's a reinvention from cinematic, but from the comics, Peter Parker as Spider-Man was always sort of kind of like, hey, all right, woohoo, I'm having a great time, and
absolutely.
I am going to I'm going to crack wise with my villains as I'm
rather than a reinvention. It certainly is a slightly different take. So
did you guys read the our cinema audience's perspective of a nerd? Where Tobey Maguire was more of a quote unquote, and you have to go back to that time period of what a nerd meant,
right?
And they knew they couldn't do that because now it would have to be some computer guy. By the way, this is from an article, so don't hate me if I'm quoting this because it's not necessarily my thoughts, but some fat guy, slob, and okay, as a superhero, we wouldn't necessarily want that, a guy that doesn't wear deodorant on screen. Getting that, and then honestly,
So they're saying they couldn't go to the nerd part of it because it's different now.
Yeah, they had to, just the way the culture and perspective of that has changed. If you guys want to read the full article, we'll include it as part of the links underneath the text of the episode.
I haven't read that one, so I would like to read that article.
It's quite interesting again, and so that's one of the reasons why they chose Andrew Garfield in this way is because they knew they couldn't do a typical nerd like they tried to do with they did very well with Tobey Maguire because in that culture it fit. Now it doesn't.
But it's funny, and it only because I just rewatched it within the past week, it still works. I mean, Tobey Maguire's nerd to me still really works, and there's no, I don't know, I didn't even bring up that I didn't say he's a geek, he's a nerd, and I get it, he's into science and math and he can do all that stuff, but Andrew Garfield's performance, Andrew Garfield's a good actor, all right, and what he brings to the role I really like. I enjoy what he brings to the role, and I enjoyed the chemistry between he and Emma Stone. So yeah, he is, to me, he is still a good Spider-Man. I think he's above the material that they've been giving him.
I would agree with that completely. Yeah, I think he is above it.
There's aspect. I love the aunt, with Sally Field. I like her kind of, whereas in the other one she was such a.
She was very stereotypical grandmotherly auntish.
Yeah, and kind of giving him his philosophy. She was like Yoda almost.
Yeah.
And I like that Sally Field wasn't.
Yeah.
It was much more of like, hey,
it's a little bit more grounded in reality for you.
Yeah. So I like that aspect of it. By the way, again, talk about kind of going out and then coming back in. Mark Webb, he was not necessarily set to do this movie, but he did.
Did they have somebody else on board? I don't know this.
I don't know who they would have had on board, but
he wasn't sure he was going to do it.
I know Dimitri and I can kind of speak about this. Do you want to kind of open that up?
Yeah, no, it's pretty. it's a little bit of trivia because the button on this movie or the credit sequence was an X-Men. See, it was a preview for X-Men, which is a Fox film, and Mark Webb, who directed 500 Days of Summer, was a Fox Searchlight movie, and he was slated to do the sequel, which he was all good and set and ready to go, and Sony really wanted him to do this sequel, and there was going back and forth. It's like Fox said, well, he's supposed to do his next movie for us. What's the concession? And the concession basically was, okay, give him to us. When you have your superhero movie, which is going to be X-Men, the new X-Men film coming up, we will throw on a trailer, or you can use that, and that'll be the mid-credit sequence. So it's actually interesting because it's the first time that I can recall where a mid for the Marvel universe, we all expect a button somewhere within the credits. Sometimes we get two, but it's usually related to what's going to expand that particular universe. So it's really odd that in Spider-Man 2, it doesn't necessarily expand the Spider-Man universe, but it promotes X-Men, which is coming out in like 4 weeks. Yeah. So
matter of days, pretty much.
Yeah, it is.
So it's just very interesting that how that deal came about within the studios to allow Mark Webb to direct Amazing Spider-Man 2.
And we'll hold off. I'm fully talking about where it's going, but he said he's gonna kind of take more of an advisor role to this whole thing rather than really direct. I think he's
Mark
Part
said?
3.
Yeah, Mark Webb.
You mean the next one?
He's going to do the third one, but then after that, because there's a third and a fourth on their way.
Slated,
He doesn't necessarily want to do the fourth one.
I would.
I mean, here's the thing: as a director, if that's when you can get attached to that and stay attached to a brand like that. It's it's like a star athlete. Your days can be limited. So you try to just hold on to the biggest thing you can for as long as you can. Right now, there's nothing bigger than Marvel.
Right, and you would hope that, I'm glad that he was able to do Amazing Spider-Man 2. He will go back to Fox Searchlight, and he'll do whatever project for them, and then he'll come back to, so long as you let your director breathe a little and let him do his passion project.
Yeah, because as an artist, he's going to want to expand.
He's going to want, and I understand
he should.
that.
He should push territory. Break new ground.
Yeah, Paramount got Michael Bay to do another Transformer movie. Like, why would you want to hand the reins over to somebody else? And they gave him Pain and Gain, which was his passion project, and I'll do another Transformers movie for you, and it makes sense. But after 3, I could see where Mark Webb says, "Hey, I want to be more I'm a consultant. Maybe you have
it's
other."
It's a tough call. I understand your point that you want to be attached, but there is a lot of diminishing returns because what else? Obviously there's money attached and everything, but as an artist, it's the same thing. It's really hard to find new ground there to.
Well, I don't know. With it's almost like now movies are becoming kind of like seasons of TV. So each movie is like one season of TV, and you go back to Vince Gilligan of Breaking Bad, you can't have him leave season 5 when there's season 6 to finish.
And it's interesting because when you go back to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, part of his beef, part of what happened on 3 is Sony was not letting him necessarily do what he wanted to do. And it depends on how you read the articles. But in a sense, Sam Raimi said, okay, I'm not going to say he purposely torpedoed the movie, but he just, okay, then this is what I'm going to give you. And when it came time for negotiating, again, your prices are only going to go up and up and up, especially if you want to keep the same actors and whatnot. And when it came time to do the next Spider-Man, there was a whole deal with Raimi and Tobey Maguire and even Kirsten Dunst saying, well, we're not going to be involved unless Sam's involved. And there's this whole inner fighting. And then finally Sony said, okay, well, goodbye. See you later. Reboot. And that's why everybody was so upset that there was a reboot so early on when, if you have one bad movie in the bunch, you could still overcome that by making a really damn good 4th movie, which I think they could have done.
Sure.
Given what he wanted, but instead we're talking about Amazing Spider-Man 2. So
Now, let's face it, they made their money. They're doing fine.
Oh, sure.
So,
Sure.
I think and to some degree, it's because people really like Spider-Man. I don't, this one has, with all its flaws and stuff like that.
He's
people
the only superhero who's a kid.
Yeah.
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Put that together. Yeah.
Except for maybe Robin.
Yeah.
But
he's
he's
a
like a
sidekick.
25-year-old. You know what I mean? How is
Yeah.
he portrayed most of the time?
Yeah.
Whereas he, especially in
But
this universe.
my point is, there's an audience for him, even though they screw up and they don't really do a great justice to the story or to the use the villains well or whatever, because this one's got everything in the kitchen sink. People still want to see this guy, even though they rebooted it. I mean,
They do.
We just saw this thing, and they still want to see it.
For the Marvel stable, Spider-Man was the face
Huge.
of Marvel.
Yeah.
I mean, he, and let's face it, cool costume. He's got cool
he's got cool
powers.
tricks,
You're right.
yeah,
He's got
absolutely.
cool tricks.
Yeah.
And, it's not a surprise. And kids can latch on to him. And he's very, very likable. And again, for Marvel, and again, I don't know the recent numbers. I don't know current numbers, especially now that we've had the Avengers initiative out there. But I still think that as far as selling books, I believe, audience members, please correct me if I'm wrong, I still believe that Spider-Man and those books are the top-selling books for Marvel to this day.
I read that. I don't know
Yeah.
how accurate that was, but I had read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine so. Let's get into some of the the story structure. And I get you just have to juggle so many different aspects, right? Think about just in terms of the elements. You have the love story. You have the love story in the sense of Dennis Leary and what
And
the
the
weight
ghost
of that holds
ghost
for
and-
Spider-Man
right,
and Peter Parker. You have the story of the father, which that's the opening kind of sequence we get. So that has to pay off somehow.
Which you don't even need, in my opinion.
I agree.
We
It
get
led to
need-
nothing.
Don't need the
Roosevelt.
opening. It was just, you don't need that. And I'm going, why are we spending this? First of all, it's a rehash of everything, and you get it all from the ant later on. You don't need, there's not a thing you need from that opening sequence. And I
for
think
me-
it dilutes the next sequence, which is him and the guys and the commencement speech. Anyway, go ahead.
For me,
It's
just
wasted.
expanding on what you were saying, I felt that it led to, there was the big deal about the word Roosevelt.
Yeah.
And then when we find out what the reveal is, it really didn't lead to anything that was going to perpetuate our plot.
It just led to him
just-
understanding his dad didn't just take off. So that
Right.
part of his psyche, which was wounded from dad abandoning him, he didn't abandon me. He tried to save me.
Yeah.
He wanted to keep me safe, so he left me here with my family, with my aunt and uncle,
Yeah.
and then he took the heat elsewhere. So
Which,
I get
by the
that
way,
part, but you don't need any of that opening sequence.
I don't think you need that. I think again where these stories, and you're gonna get a third for the most part.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Now we know there's a fourth, but I think something like that, where the redemption of his father, you hold that as close as you can to the end. Only because now finally, where he's been so troubled throughout. Now, right, he's dealing with the Dennis Leary thing.
Yeah, because now it's not a thing he
he's
has to
dealing
deal
with
with
Ben
anymore.
Parker.
Yeah.
Ben, his uncle.
You want that ghost hanging on him the whole time, like, oh my God, what did my father did this thing, and that's one reason why he might be compelled to do right in the world, because his dad did such horror in the world, in his mind.
Yeah.
But now it's taken away, and it was like, okay, that's gone.
And how many ghosts can you?
That's
All you
right.
need is one.
You got his dad, whatever. Then you got his uncle's death. Then you got
Eventually
Gwen's dad's death, and then you got Gwen's.
Right.
My God, really? I mean, it's
Yeah.
the same. You're that's the same thing he's having to deal with. Give your hero something else to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's true. So that's Peter Parker alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so glad we got that covered.
Yeah.
And then you have the story of Jamie Foxx's character, Electrode. Then you have Harry Osborn.
Right.
You kind of have what's going on at Oscorp. You got that storyline and everything else, and it just
and then you throw in Rhino.
Yeah.
Then you throw in
Rhino,
a Russian truck driver. Paul Giamatti.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of elements to really juggle, and from our experience, John and mine, and perhaps yours, Dimitri, I don't know because I haven't worked firsthand, but it's audiences tire. The more you throw in, it actually, the simpler you can make things, the more beautiful it actually becomes.
Yeah,
your message
the
is
whole
clear.
less is more. Exactly. They had this whole wonderful thing about time, and that the theme about time. The opening shot is a clock. Gwen's commencement speech is all about you don't have enough time. Make sure you use your time wisely. And she dies in a clock tower, and he's literally trying to stop time.
Yep.
With his foot in the gears of a clock, and he can't. I mean, so what metaphor? But that all gets lost because there's so much other crap in between that is really not necessary. I don't think.
I'm gonna say one other thing that we haven't brought up yet. I think one other thing that hurt this movie for me is like I just come off of seeing Captain America Winter Soldier,
Right.
which again, when you talk plotting and villains and everything, they set something up, and there was an army. There were multiple villains because there was an army, but it was basically this Hydra, and then you're finding out the Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier was very plot intensive, but the juggling act worked much better.
Yeah, way better balance.
Where in this one, it just literally was all over the place, where you really can only mainly focus on what's working best, and that's the relationship.
And they just lost their narrative. I mean, it was going off in so many different detours, and then for me, it just didn't coalesce well enough.
Yeah, I mean, it was always going to be tough, and
but I think if you could have eliminated, I mean, because you could have easily eliminated. First of all, you didn't even need to have the whole dad sequence at the beginning. So if you eliminate that, you can spend more time fleshing out the other characters. We could have learned really what the hell is Electro all about, because he Rise of Electro, and boom! Oh, by the way, he's exploded now. He's done. So there's it wasn't really It was his character was for me 2-dimensional. You didn't really flesh.
Because again, there was if you plotted out. We so much build up, right?
Yeah.
And let's say we're an hour and 20 minutes into the movie. Yeah, I unfortunately didn't have a stopwatch, but like it just felt like we were so deep into the movie when finally Harry and Peter met.
Yeah.
And really got that going.
Right.
And you kind of know Electro's out there, but you're not really dealing with him. You're dealing with this aspect of it.
It's almost like he's an afterthought.
And then so most of it for me, like all the action happens in the last 40 minutes, and all just. You're trying to juggle it.
And for me, I'm going, well, especially the Electro one, that was anticlimactic to me. It's like, we're done? That's it? It just
then
fell flat.
Well,
and
I think
Harry
to your
comes in as a
point,
Green
right?
Goblin.
And then Harry comes in. So it's like you had this big, which was an exhausting set piece fight between Spider-Man and Electro.
Yeah.
And then after all that's done, here comes another one.
Yeah,
it's like, and you're right. Yeah. We get belabored, or I get belabored as an audience member, going, all right, what else can be thrown in?
Exactly.
So it almost does take away from the impact. To me, the most important part is, and we know this because we've all watched this. To me, the important factor of this movie is the death of Gwen Stacy, and that it was impactful. For the people who didn't know it was going to happen, I heard lots of gasps.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of
lots of gasps, and upon research and reading, there were many audience members that even had tears. Like that, they were very. And again, that goes to the strength of the relationship. But had you not had so many things going on, it really could have been even more important as to what's going to happen with our hero. So we can get more into because I started doing a lot of research and what in the comic books, what that meant to the comic book world and to Peter Parker and what it did. So being to me, I feel that that's the most important aspect of the movie. They almost took away from it.
I guess if we're gonna talk about that, I mean, the one thing that they did actually take away to strengthen that was Shailene Woodley as Mary Jane, because where that would have fit in story wise, I don't know.
And I think it was a very wise decision not to include her in this movie.
Agreed.
How do you even, then knowing that that's going to be your pivotal point. And if, as an audience, you've been introduced to Mary Jane,
it's like,
you're like,
you've just diluted that whole exactly.
You're just gonna move on to her.
One to the other. Yeah. So
and that's not really fair.
No.
Not.
Well, it's not. No, and you're absolutely right. And I think they did make a very wise decision because there was no.
I mean, in terms of not having
MJ
as part of this.
MJ in this because it does everything.
Do you guys know what I know one of the scenes that was kind of included that was cut out. Do you guys know any? For me, it was they in
the backyard,
as I'm read,
they're
in the backyard and like taking out trash or something like that. To the extent of the dialogue, I don't know. I just know that aspect of it. But if there's any other ones,
Now, I believe, please somebody correct me if I'm wrong. In the comics, MJ shows up at the funeral. Because again, we're all in high school, so everybody sort of knew, and that's where that relationship at least buds or begins. But again, had you had MJ in the movie, it so would have distracted from the death of Gwen, because everybody would have gone, "Oh, that's Mary Jane,
right.
Mary Jane,
and that's
Mary Jane."
Shailene Woodley.
All that wonderful momentum they had created between the relationship between those two
Absolutely
would have been dissipated.
Yep.
Because we would have
So a very smart move on their part to.
But similarly, for the same reason, you kind of the Harry thing and following the goblin and how he becomes a goblin, it dissipates Electro. I mean, and then you have it all dissipates all that energy. So all that wonderful stuff that you could have mined for a wonderful dramatic conflict that has a great climax gets just spit out.
Let's talk about this. I mean, how grounded in realism is this universe of Spider-Man for you? Because it from the Amazing Spider-Man 1, it seemed so logical, and as kind of Harry and Peter are talking, it still kind of seems logical and everything else in terms of we were developing this for the army, et cetera, et cetera. And the thing that kind of just makes it go weird, we keep bringing up Adam West Batman, right? But that was very much conscious and whatever else, and it was set up, and you're going to go along with that. And whereas with this, we've been, for more or less, to me, it seems very realistic, or as realistic as it can be. And with Electrode, it just, and especially just, it just went such a different route.
It didn't feel like
that
it was
might as well made the Adam West crooked villain.
Right.
That's what I meant about the two-dimensional thing. It's like, wait a minute, everything else. I mean, you painstakingly explained how Harry could become the Goblin with, like you just said, these weaponry that we've created for the army or whatever it is, and you can see all that, and you can see that making logical sense. And then this comes up, and it's like, how did this? This is just seems. This is where it delved into, and it got too cartoonish, and I'm not talking comic book. It got cartoonish.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to, your superhero or your James Bond is only as good as your villain.
Yep.
And if you have too many and you can't focus on a villain to flush things out, like Electro, for example, my biggest problem with Electro wasn't how he became Electro or whatever. It was the turn. I mean, this was a guy that was, in a sense, a very Rupert Pumpkin-ish, and Kings of Comedy, Martin Scorsese movie I'm referencing here. He meets Spider-Man early on, and Spider-Man gives him this word of encouragement, going, "Hey, Max," he goes, "I need you safe. You're my eyes and ears on the street." And
everybody else ignores him.
But here's the thing.
One person that pays attention.
Unless I'm wrong, John, in outline form, this works.
Yeah.
It just wasn't fleshed out after the outline.
Yeah, and the turn you're talking about is he turns
like that for no reason. I mean, Spider-Man was his
idol. The reason was we have to because we only have so much time left. But
exactly.
But it wasn't.
But
in
it
the
was
story.
never like. I mean, this is a guy who loved Spider-Man. Love. He idolized him. He became infatuated. Became a little bit crazy. And when he becomes Electro,
a little off going in, but we get that.
Yeah, and we get that. And then when he becomes Electro, there still wasn't that hatred towards Spider-Man, but then Spider-Man's a liar, he's a cheater, he's going to kill me, he's going to hurt me, he's going to do this. And it just comes literally out of nowhere where you don't buy it. It's like, how did somebody who, like, it wasn't like Spider-Man hurt him?
The only thing I can speak to is that I'm guessing they think, well, this guy's already bent to begin with, and then this thing happens to him, so his mind's not right. But that's just such a leap for us to, and it just was way too convenient not to show it.
Yeah, yeah.
It just looked like what? So now you hate him? What?
And again, when you look at the first two Raimi pictures with Green Goblin and Oscorp, and talk about Willem Dafoe's performance as Harry's dad and the Green Goblin. Yes, he chews up the scenery and spits it out. That's fine, but at least there is a reason why he becomes the Green Goblin. And it wasn't to fight Spider-Man. It was to try to save his business and to take it away from the military. And he had his beef against that. Yeah. And then the passing of the torch to Harry, is a big thing. And then when you go into Spider-Man 2, again, you're dealing with Doc Ock, who was a very sympathetic character. He was mentor, if I remember correctly.
And you saw his struggle.
You saw the struggle. this one didn't have like
Yeah,
any
nothing.
of that.
It's as deep as a dime.
Even with when Harry becomes the Green Goblin, like it's just like there was no struggle with it.
No, that's
He
it. It
hates
happened way too
Spider-Man
fast, way
too,
too
and-
convenient.
yeah.
We never got to see any of that
You know
struggle.
what? Truthfully, for me, I understood the turn because they shot at him. Where they set it up.
Yeah, except
you had-
he
you had-
attributed all that anger towards one Spider-Man.
Well,
who
you had
didn't
Spider-Man.
shoot
You
him.
had Spider-Man. You had Gwen. Right, so he befriended Gwen, and they shared that moment of like, oh, it's my birthday. Oh, thank you.
Right.
And he likes Spider-Man. So the turn should have been the return to liking Spider-Man, and that's how you appease him. That's how you defeat him. You know what I mean?
I see. Okay.
Story-wise, I mean,
You could do that, absolutely.
I think that would have been the better way to go because then you bring him down. And again, just that elevator scene with Jamie Foxx and
They did a lot of work on
Emma
the elevator,
Stone.
by the way.
Yeah,
yeah.
they did. Yeah.
But that's that scene was to me was great because it in that moment it served two great purposes. It obviously elevated Jamie Foxx's character, and for Emma Stone, the character of Gwen, it was like it just made her think of Spider-Man and more importantly Peter Parker. And so I give kudos to that scene. And again, the turn
And
for me
had
didn't
they-
mind so much,
I
but
d-
it
I
should
did.
have come back to that.
I
rather
agree.
than
And had they done something,
batteries
that,
and magnets.
that would have been way more interesting.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. I just didn't. It just didn't work for me because I didn't get to see everybody shooting in here at Electro, but he focuses all that energy
Yo, he
literally
focused
on
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man for what? And I went, what? Why?
Yeah, and especially since we know Max and
Yeah.
and his idolization of the character. It was just for me. It was just a very quick turn that came out of nowhere.
I mean, and also, it just suffered from, and this is why some movies make the very conscious choice to not hire known actors. It's just Jamie Foxx. It just read. No offense, I don't think there's anything he could have done. It just read like Jamie Foxx. You just
I
looked at
hear
it and
what
like,
you're
hey,
saying.
it's Jamie Foxx. Oh, look, it's Jamie Foxx. And I just
You couldn't overcome that, huh?
I couldn't. I don't think
and
maybe
could it be
conscious
because it wasn't-
Maybe it's not conscious, but I don't think a lot of audiences could.
Well, I think that goes back to the fact that it didn't have enough meat on it. But had there been more of a backstory, more of a character development, more something, then you probably would have been able to get into the character more. But you were left with not much, and therefore, in the absence of what could have been, you're left to see, oh, it's just Jamie Foxx.
Yeah.
As opposed to a real full-on
you're left
fleshed-out
with that,
character.
and hey, there's B.J. Novak from The Office
okay.
being his. Just no one. I mean, I understand
That's
we
why you
live in
wanted
a
a character actor.
I understand we live in a bully society, but even in the world, like, no,
Because that stood out for you too, right?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and I agree
even
with
the
you.
call, like, hey, can you help me? No,
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with you on that, even though that character is supposed to be an Easter egg for being a character who's part of, I believe, the Sinister Six, because he becomes a Spider-Man villain as well eventually. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of it was so stereotypical. And to your Jamie Foxx point,
yeah.
when you look at the first two Spider-Men, so you had Willem Dafoe, who was a star in his right, but not like nobody that you would, I mean, he fit in the role and played the villain well. The next one had Alfred Molina, who, I always remember him, throw me the idol and I give you the whip guy.
But
he's
he's got an extensive CV. So he's got
and
good
he's
resume.
a ton of movies, but
Yeah.
yet he doesn't, his persona doesn't overshadow his acting or the
But-
villain as Doc
But
Ock.
let's just compare how those two were written. I mean, the Doc Ock has a far better,
Absolutely.
character and backstory than Electro.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even compare.
No, and you're right. I think Electro just wasn't fleshed out. And Jamie Foxx can be a really good actor. I wish he was just
Academy
given
Award
more to
winner.
act.
I mean Django Unchained. He was, he
Oh
was
my
phenomenal.
God, he's great. Phenomenal.
It just
And again, I think he suffers under what they gave him to do.
Yeah,
He's like, all right.
absolutely.
yeah.
Which kind of surprised me because he's such a good actor and you didn't really give him really anything to.
Yeah, I mean, even though like in the first one you had Dennis Leary, and
Right.
it's always tough for me to how to argue who's bigger than who, in that respect, because I've unfortunately, I like to consider myself an audience member, but sometimes being in the business, I'm a little bit separated. But at the same time, you weren't like, oh, that's Dennis Leary on screen. For me, it was like, oh, this is Gwen's father.
Right. And you know, it's interesting because even in Amazing Spider-Man 2, when his vision came up, I looked at it as Gwen Stacy's father.
Yeah.
You know, so I think, that totally fits your point, and totally makes sense. Absolutely.
What other, should we talk about the other villains?
Well, they need mentioning. I mean,
let's talk about Rhino. Before we
Paul Giamatti,
because he opens up the movie.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, there's Paul.
Actually, I didn't notice that. I didn't even get it was him at the beginning.
It's so quick cut that I didn't notice. There's much said about him, like, because he's in the trailer a lot. You know, that truck sequence, which is a great sequence too. You know, a great fun set piece to open up your movie in a sense for your superhero.
Had you opened it without it being
better, but yet I didn't realize. Somebody had pointed out, goes, "Oh, that's Paul Giamatti." I said, "The truck driver."
Yeah.
And when you look at him, you're like, "Oh my God, what a transformation!" And I would have expected that Rhino would have been in the movie more, but again, you just had another villain that ended up he was a caricature. Yeah. And he opens up the movie, and when we came to the end, I'm thinking to myself, wait, I remember in the trailer that there's a scene where Spider-Man faces off against Rhino in his suit. We haven't had that yet. And I'm like going, good God, are they going to throw something else? And then it ends up, that's how the movie ends, but like literally ends just as that fight was about to get going.
Like that trailer, by the way, it's exactly how the trailer ends.
It does.
Exactly.
It does. Yeah, it's a trailer for the third movie. That's, I know.
And, you know, again, when we talked about exhausting, you've just right there. I'm tired. Now he's. I knew he had to come up again. You know, Paul Giamatti gets about, you know, all in 10 minutes worth of screen time. He's completely out of the movie in the middle. It's not even referenced really.
Which is okay. You're like, he's just a truck driver. Like, he's a truck driver. That's it.
Yeah.
Just a truck driver, and I don't know. It just.
Well, I didn't notice him in the beginning. I mean, obviously I knew the character. I didn't know it was Paul at the moment. I didn't even pay attention to who it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I enjoy. I don't mind the way they ended. I think that's fine. I think, again, take some of the stuff out in the middle, flesh out, and I think, you know, Electro. I think just calm him down with Gwen and Spider-Man. But it is what it is. Harry and Peter.
Harry and Peter
haven't seen each other since they were kids. What I did like about it is that he's kind of sharing this common bond with a lot of people. Gwen lost her father.
Right.
Now Harry lost his father. You know, and obviously Peter not only lost his father, well, his parents, but now he's also lost Uncle Ben.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, but there was one point that seemed odd to me, was because Peter at some point refers to Harry as his best friend.
Right.
And I went, what? You haven't seen him in 10 years?
Yeah,
and he's your best friend, and you've seen him for a week?
If you're a kid, you kind of always know who you...
Yeah, I don't. That didn't work for
John
me.
Didn't have best friends.
Well, it didn't work for me because it seemed to have been crowbarred in. Like, very much so. I mean, I appreciated the fact that, again, it's further proving how Peter Parker can be a sensitive guy.
Yeah.
And instead of like, and again, I just, you go back to the Raimi Spider-Man, like that friendship was already there. That was there. It had a good, there was, it existed. In this one, Harry's off.
But here's what I liked about elements of what they used to do.
But this is what I think. What I really liked about it, and this is all you needed, was he was there for Pete.
Right.
When his father took off and his parents took off. That's what Harry was there for. And he just wanted to be there for him when his dad died. That's all you needed. But the crowbarring this thing like we're best friends, it's different if you're best friends and, you haven't seen anybody for 10 years, but you're 30 and you hadn't seen him for 10 years. But you're 18 now. You haven't seen him since you were 8. So much happens in those 10 years. I mean, that's half of your life. This guy's your best friend you haven't seen. It's like, why? You don't even have to do that.
Couldn't agree with you more.
And you point out the fact that actually, no, you're not best friends. And to shove that in there makes you lose all credibility.
Yeah, I couldn't agree. Like, had they not had that line of dialogue,
just
and he
eliminate
just said, "Hey, you know what? I remember when I lost my folks.
That's
You
all
were
you
there
need.
for me.
'Cause that does
I wanna do the
reinforces who
same for
Peter
you."
is, just
Right.
like you were saying.
Yep.
Well, here's what-
and then they can go off and skip their stones, and that scene
it.
works. But that scene
Plays
would have
better.
worked so much better had they not crammed in.
I get what you're saying,
know.
and I'm gonna kind of, if we let's say we take out the father storyline, right, that aspect of it. Now you can develop this more in the sense that now they can be with that bond, they can actually grow to become best friends.
Exactly, that's my point.
And
Yeah.
now they go.
the throwing of the stone scene, because that was kind of really the start of their splintering. Now you can have that, and it has more meaningful impact, because it's like, oh, you guys were inseparable, and now you're talking about Spider-Man. You have different views on Spider-Man. You have different views on Electro, and just life in general.
And they had such
it
a great
seemed
foundation. They've both been abandoned in some degree.
Sure.
So they had this great foundation, but they hadn't been there for 10 years. But since they have that foundation now, they could really come together as best friends.
Yeah.
And it just fell to pieces by shoving it in there that you already are. No, let them grow to be that, and then have it not be possible because of what's, like you said, the differences between them as well.
Yeah. No, yeah, it was, again, just not well flushed out or thought about, really. I think they just wanted to keep to the mythology of the comic books.
Which I think was a mistake, if you ask me. I think the whole Gwen Stacy thing might have been yes, granted, in the comic book she dies, and she should, but that doesn't necessarily mean she has to die in this one. I thought it was a very interesting choice. I don't necessarily think it was a good choice. You could argue that they're shooting themselves in the foot, because the best thing about the movie, almost by everybody's estimation, is that relationship. I think it's great that you now thrust your main character and not have him have any moorings except his aunt. But what do you do now? Because you bring in another. Even if you bring in MJ now, it's like, oh, okay, we're gonna hear the same thing now. It's gonna be another relationship. And it's like, you just started this great thing. She just started standing on her own. We had, she's going to go to Oxford, do all these things. She just helps him, take out.
And they were a great duo.
Exactly. That's my point. They were just figuring it out. I'm going, well, that's interesting. We don't usually see that in territory like this. It usually goes the other way. And then, oh, you have to kill her. Okay. Just when they just start to figure it out as a couple. Yeah. Oh, let's kill her. Yeah. And here's the thing. Your main character has already dealt with death.
Yeah.
Now he has to. It's like, okay, no, he's still gonna have to deal with that.
Well, I think I want to go back to you, Dimitri.
Just give him something else to deal with.
In terms of that, the opening, whether you knew the comics or not, and if you did, you kind of had an inkling that this was gonna happen.
Yeah, there'd been rumblings for months.
But at the same time,
years. Thank you.
Yeah.
But if you just know story, at least her speech at the beginning was like,
yeah, it's
all
like,
right,
oh, yeah, it could be signposted anymore.
Yeah.
You just signed your death warrant.
Yeah, you just pretty much telegraphed.
I'm going, you couldn't handle that more deftly? I mean, so, whatever. It was just way too obvious and on the nose. Especially, and then the speech again when we're at the power plant, and she's saying, "No, I'm doing this," and she's saying, this, "I make my choice." I go, "You're dead."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, it was, when they were going through the casting process of this entire, of this amazing Spider-Man reboot. As soon as they said, and Emma Stone as Gwen Stacy, I said, "Oh, okay, I know where this is going. Know what's going to happen to that character." For me, it was just a question of when. I knew that, we know that there was going to be a trilogy. Were they going to save it to the end of the third, the middle of the third? Is that how the beginning of the third was going to start off, so that our character, will they do it, they wouldn't be brazen enough to do it in the first. They have to build up the relationship. So, but then going into the production of part two here, we do live in a very, it's weird. We live in such a spoiler-rific society.
Which I don't understand. I don't want the, I don't. I mean, I get it. Some people love to know all the spoilers.
There were two sides to this coin, because they started sending out photos of Emma Stone in costume.
In her outfit, yeah.
And she was wearing pretty much the same outfit that Gwen dies in the comic books. And so right there, that telegraphed. And people didn't say, because they didn't know for sure.
Yeah.
Mark Webb was very coy about it, as well as the rest of the cast. But the hint was there that, oops, it's going to happen in this movie. So people who were in tune with the comic books, who were fans, they sort of had the inkling that this was going to happen. Yet, we do live in such a spoiler-rich, digital age. It's amazing to me too that so many people did not know that this death was going to happen, so that it still remained a shock and awe kind of an event when it happened in the picture. And I think that there's so many spoiler things out there, and it's a very well-read comic book that a lot of people still don't know. So spoilers only reach out to a certain graph line, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know it.
Yeah,
I was a
I
fan
didn't
of
know
Spider-Man,
either.
but I didn't know Gwen died. I didn't even know that.
and I think it's a good comparison too. We can talk about like just for a second, like Game of Thrones is the same way.
Right.
Book read by millions globally, and yet only so many people they knew about Eddard Stark. They knew the Red Wedding, the Purple Wedding. They knew all these things that were gonna be huge. Yet they kept it to themselves. The readers kept it to themselves. So when it's on
When it
HBO, exactly.
No, I think they did it,
and so
it worked in this movie.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it works in this movie
I think
too.
they did it. I had wished that they had thinned it out so it would have been more impact, which what we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Because it could have had
Especially
a much greater
you
impact.
know, they make a big point about not being the damsel in distress, and you
Right.
said it was her choice.
Yeah, and then as soon as she makes a choice that's proactive and stuff, you got to get rid of her. And I go, why do that? We've seen that trope many times. It's like, the damsel in distress is always gonna. So he always has to deal with the fact that this is gonna happen. And I'm just going. I don't think you have to be tied to a comic book that happened 40 years ago. I mean, if you want to kill her off, fine, I guess. But what I haven't seen him do is I haven't seen any of these characters, figure out how they can make it work.
Yeah, no, and
because they always the woman they care, it's usually the woman they care about gets killed.
a woman in a refrigerator.
Woman, yeah,
Yeah,
you.
it's
There's that.
but in '73, when the night that Gwen Stacy came out, it was impactful to that world, to the comic book world, because at that time nothing had been done like that before. And this I find interesting is because Gwen and Peter had been together for, I don't know, about 10 years or so. And the concept of it was, well, where's this relationship going to go? Marvel put out an edict. And I find this fascinating because I think DC has a similar edict that exists today. They didn't want them to get married. They didn't want Spider-Man to be married because that would make him old. Yeah, it would make him older.
It would age him.
And it would age him, and he's married, and they didn't want to tether him down. So the only thing
Great power comes great responsibility.
There you go.
and
I want that power.
That's it.
and from there
Who
they
knows what
said,
his kids would be like.
we have to kill Gwen Stacy. And
Which I think is great
which
for
is fine
comics. I
for-
think I
right.
get that, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't think you need to be tied to that for a movie. I mean, because you had something really interesting happening there towards the end of the movie. She's standing on her own, and she's an equal to Spider-Man in this particular storyline, I should say,
Yeah.
because she's the one that comes up with this the magnet, whatever the hell it is.
And here's what would have been interesting: had Spider-Man tried to save her, but she saved herself, and eventually that would have been like, hey, this is why you need me, and that's why you have to listen to me, because I can do this, and stop trying to be forceful.
Yeah, and then of course you could always throw that on its head, because as soon as she says that, then you could put her in jeopardy, and But I'm just saying it would have been interesting to see something different and something new rather than the same, and that's where I went, oh come on, you've had 40 years to figure this out, to try something different. Why do the same thing?
The way I see it is that I don't think that they, I don't think that they had a choice in a sense. They may have had a choice as to when it was going to happen.
That's my point. But you could have mined that area more.
Yeah,
Because
and
you barely got, and it was actually working. I mean, that was crisp. That stuff between them was interesting and different. And then you killed her off right before you really got a chance to do anything with it.
yeah, and it's funny because there is an article that I found that's in the Business Insider that says Amazing Spider-Man sequel is blowing a huge opportunity. It's pretty much echoes everything that you've said. And I'll share it with, I'll share it so we can put it up on the website, but it's like the scene's hinted early on. It's telegraphed right at the beginning.
Yeah.
In her impending doom, not only is the chemistry, it's like, where do they go from there? They've built this up. You've had great chemistry. You can at least milk another good movie of this because people really enjoy this. She's a smart character. And it's really funny because even Manohla Dargis, in her New York Times review, was like, most women in big comic book movies continue to be consigned to supporting roles. He goes, and that's because unlike other superhero stories in which godlike heroes live and love among ordinary folk, Peter remains strongly human presence. I mean, he is human. And by, he goes, this blunt, uncharacteristically violent development is true to the source material, but it's a bummer and a blown opportunity both narratively and in terms of how the male-female characters work. So it's basically saying so it's just a very interesting dynamic and how they chose to do it. They also, upon research, they filmed it in many different ways.
Is that right?
Yeah, she died a hell of a lot more violently. Now, if I may for a second, in the comic books, it is Spider-Man squaring off against Green Goblin. He has Gwen. They're on top of a bridge, a Brooklyn Bridge or Washington Bridge. That's always in debate. But in any case, on top of a bridge, the Green Goblin lobs her off the bridge, and Spider-Man with his web, he ensnares her legs. She's going down in like a dive, and he wraps he wraps her legs up, and he seemingly saves her. And in fact, as he's lifting her up, he is in true Spider-Man fashion. He's like, Peter Parker's going, oh my God, it's so awesome to be Spider-Man. He goes, I can save the one that I love. He goes, it's great having these powers. And when he lifts her up, she's dead. And it was all... Then it went to, did she die from whiplash? And then the theories went on, maybe Green Goblin snapped her neck before he threw her off. And there was so much indecision as to how it happened that Marvel actually had to come up with a press release and say, dear readers, we are sad to say that Gwen Stacy is dead. She died of whiplash.
Whiplash. So, it wasn't whiplash.
And after him thinking that he's such the hero, it was his own doing. And then when filming this scene, Mark Webb wanted to take great care, but they actually had a scene where Green Goblin did snap her neck before throwing her. He stabbed her violently.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. And they were saying each iteration we did seemed too violent. And the clock piece, it is a metaphor. It is a theme of the movie. He couldn't stop time. And they wanted more. They wanted to impact it, that the way he caught her in the webbing, that she did hit. I was shocked when it happened and how it happened.
I can say the same thing. As it was happening,
even knowing,
it got me too. So I'm not saying it wasn't done well. I mean, I can say that what came before it, what came after, could have been more impactful.
Exactly.
But I still like the way they did it, and I also appreciate the fact that if for no other reason, it forces them to do something different for the third installment. So that's a good thing, and hopefully they'll mine new territory. But I'm just saying, had you kept her in, you could have mined the territory that you laid out in the very small 10 minutes of this particular movie. You could have really had some really interesting movie stuff.
Yeah, and maybe move it to the third movie where it happens within the beginning.
Exactly.
And, your superhero has to deal with, oh, my head. He's like, I'm not so super after all. He goes, I wasn't responsible with my powers or something.
Or have him have to decide between, okay, if I either have to save Gwen or I have to save these 10,000 people. I don't know, something, so that there's some other moral dilemma rather than what he's already had to deal with.
Yeah.
Well,
and again, I'll say moral dilemma. It was set up much differently in the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, the first movie, squaring off against the Green Goblin. They had a very similar scene, except that Green Goblin gave him the moral dilemma. He goes, okay, Spider-Man. He goes, I have a gondola of people over here.
Yeah, exactly.
He goes, you choose. You're so powerful. Go ahead, choose. And he lobs MJ off the bridge. Yep. And it's can he save both of them, which he tries. And again, they say that was in direct correlation to,
because what I'm thinking is do that, except have him not be able to save her. And then have him realize as Spider-Man that I can't do everything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just something that he would have to deal with. I think that was
because that was the whole point. He couldn't do both. He couldn't. The first scene with Paul Giamatti, right?
Yeah.
As the truck driver, he couldn't make the graduation.
Yeah.
He just got he got there to receive his diploma and give her a kiss, which everyone was like, woo.
Yeah.
But he missed her speech, which was for her the most important part.
Yeah.
Right. We haven't asked our sole
Marissa.
female counterpart.
Yeah, let's get her in here.
Marissa, you have to ask you. as a female, what did you think? Was it a shock to you? Did you know that it was coming, or was this spoiled for you? And how did you feel? And how do you feel about Gwen Stacy?
And Marissa's dead.
I think she's
literally dead.
She's having technical difficulties, so we'll move on until she gets them fixed.
I think she's just literally dead.
True.
And,
was it whiplash? Or
was it whiplash?
I don't know what it was.
Or did she just fall asleep or portal?
We'll hopefully get her.
Sorry,
to wrap up kind of the story elements, because I want to move into some. There's some obviously. There's a lot of cool stuff to talk about the actual production of this, and that one we can be a little bit more objective about.
Okay.
But
wait, but I didn't hear how were you about that whole sequence where she died? Because I didn't. Was it a surprise to you? I didn't even.
It was a surprise.
It was a surprise.
It was
Did
a
it work
surprise
for you?
I knew something. I knew
because
I
of
was
her first speech. You kind of knew.
I knew something was going to happen, but I was like, they're not going to kill her.
Oh, really? Okay.
I was like, they're not going to, even as it was happening, right? Because it was all slowed down.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about this again in the production side of it, but it was like, they're not going to kill her. No, she's going to, it's Emma Stone.
Yeah, they're going to save her, right?
Yeah. So it was like, you're not going to, come on, you're not going to
And
kill
even
her.
when he was crying and you thought at some point her eyes are going to open, right?
I mean, there's some, honestly, I swear to God, and you know what, forgive me, God bless you all, but if you fans, you know what, you guys are an integral part, but if you really believe that Gwen Stacy's going to come out of the ground, just not happening. That's then we have a Amazing Spider-Man Walking Dead crossover that I'm not ready for.
Well, in the comics, there is a zombified universe of Marvel, which he comes back in the comics. So
I'm done.
I think, Marissa, are you awake?
I am.
Oh, welcome back, Marissa.
So we were talking about the
Hello,
Gwen
guys.
Stacy thing. We were
been
wanting your feedback on whether or not the Gwen Stacy death surprised you. Did it work for you? How did you feel about killing off the woman, as we've seen many times in these comic books? Any thoughts, feelings?
Well, me personally, I've never personally read the comic book, so I didn't know the story of really Gwen Stacy in death. But I was surprised too, like Phil said. You can't kill Emma Stone; she's awesome.
Emma Stone?
But when we saw her fall and the whole body snap, and just that subtle sound that like she actually hit the ground, was like, oh, there's no way she's coming back from that. No way.
Did
so
you
I was
want her-
surprised. A little upset because I liked Gwen Stacy and Peter together. They had great chemistry, especially we see the whole film where they're trying to be together, and then like they're actually together in the end. But then that happened, so that was upsetting.
Yep.
But so I was surprised, just as a general watcher of the film. I was surprised.
Would you have wanted to see how they could be together as a couple in the next film and see how they might be able to work it out, or were you going, nah, it's okay. I'm glad that she's dead.
Well, I think it would be interesting if she didn't die and her going to Oxford and going to a completely different area. I'm like, how would they work that out long distance? Or he did say that he was going to travel. I was like, Spider-Man is known for being in New York, not anywhere else. So even if she did go to Oxford, I don't think they would have been together in that capacity. So there had been another way for her to get kind of have her character off of the franchise.
Well, to wrap this part of it up, again, because I want to get into production, there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about with that. But, in going, let's kind of wrap it up with the Rhino.
Okay.
In the sense that, because, you left them off on such a downbeat. And, in the first movie, it's debatable in this how it ended. Was it happy or was it sad? Well, he's like, promises are meant to be broken. So you're like, oh, they're going to go out. It's happy.
Yeah.
And in this one, if you're doing a trilogy, you want to, it's kind of like a story. You have to have, if the act, if right before the climax it's sad, then the ending's kind of going to be good. Or if it's good, it's going to end sadly. And so it's like, well, we could have ended sadly only to end happy on the third one, in the third movie. And I just felt the speech, it was just so fast. Because
speech to the kid, or what do you mean? Which speech?
No, to the USB thumb drive of Gwen's speech.
And
how inspiring it was, because he's we for like 2 minutes we watch him every season being at this grave, and then everything is better just by seeing her off that thumb drive.
And you've waited that long?
Yeah, I don't know. He didn't know it was there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's and again, it sets up the third movie wonderfully.
And again, I think
story wise,
that's what to me is the challenge as I'm watching this movie is that because they had way too much story, every moment where they could have actually taken some time or have it rather than have it in a quick turn, you could have seen that evolve. They didn't have time for that because they had to get to it so they could set up the third movie. And I think for me that was a mistake because I think each movie has to, if you want to do a trilogy, that's great and fine and dandy, but they should stand on their own as a movie, if you ask me. I hate movies because some movies that are in a trilogy. I hate movies.
You hate movies.
I hate movies that in the middle trilogy, the part 2 is just a 2.5-hour trailer for the third one. Those drive me crazy.
All right.
Complete missed opportunity.
Well, things that might not drive us crazy. Let's talk about some cool stuff. So this movie was not. Unlike the first Amazing Spider-Man, it was not shot in actual 3D. The first one was shot on the Red Epic in 5K. This one was shot on Kodak Vision 3 500T, and boy, have I used that before.
Is that right?
I mean, it's Kodak Vision 3, Vision 3. Yeah, it's so synonymous with film, like actual film. Like it's But it's a great. I mean, they talk about the f-stop range. It's phenomenal. Kodak film. It's
Sure.
and then it was converted after that. Cinematographer Dan Mendel decided that's what he wanted to go with.
Yeah, they shot 35, which is very interesting. But they did a great job. The movie looked good. I mean, I had no qualms about any of the set pieces. They looked fantastic. It was great on a nice, like I said, in a nice large screen format. The 3D I thought was very engaging and actually brought me into the movie more. There was actually times. I mean, I'm so happy. I think 3D is coming to be what we've all expected it to be. Like there were parts where I literally did move my head. It's like, wow, that felt like that was going to be right in my lap. And visually, I thought that they did a really good job. Mark Webb, is coming into his own as an action director. Production design and everything. Everything looked.
Let's talk about production design. Again, these are kind of fun 10 facts about the movie, but the film's major scene set. I'm reading this from Studio Daily. The film's major action scene set in Times Square was actually photographed at Long Island's Gold Coast Studios, where a stretch of Broadway and 7th Avenue between 46th and 47th streets were built.
Yeah.
So not actually there.
Worked for me. They fooled me. I didn't even think about it because it was just so grand and happened so quickly that I wasn't even trying to figure. Oh, hey, that doesn't look quite right. I didn't even pay attention to that part of it. So. The deception worked.
Times Square is so just iconic with lights.
Right.
As long as you got that part of it right, and
as long as you have the lights and the
exactly.
digital billboards,
that kind of got.
Then you need.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the scene in terms of just everything, because I mean, you had
the Times Square sequence.
Yeah, in terms of shooting, because you had. I mean, right? The Matrix opened up bullet time, and now it's just gone to. As I was watching it, it's just on a whole new level.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, we literally were following this, and we're moving every which way, seeing the railings and the people, and
it was trying to give us, in a sense, I think this is what Mark Webb was trying to do, is almost give us spider sense.
Yeah, I think because again, one of the things was time. I thought he was slowing down time so we could see what it's like in real time for Spider-Man.
Yeah,
and what it would be real time. All that happens in a blink of an eye, but this is all that happens in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, and this is how he sees, he perceives this going down. Mm-hmm. And I thought they handled it great.
Yeah, I think it was great. It was terrific because my eyes are just done. Well, okay. Wow, really? Okay, well, I'm in.
And in most times when they do a lot of slow-mo, it becomes cliche, annoying, and overused. Here with Amazing Spider-Man, I think that it was used it was great because I actually did get to see the action unfold through Spider-Man's eyes, which is fantastic. And you got to see all of his perspectives and see how all these people were saved from touching that rail.
Yeah.
That scene was great. Yeah. It was he stopped time Well, his spider senses were so quick.
Yeah.
Time slows down.
Yeah, I thought that was great.
And
It was
yeah,
terrific.
and it looked great. The other cool thing,
It's almost
too,
like you could see, the spider is supposed to see, I don't know how many different, like a fly.
Right.
It was almost like he saw all those things at once. And how to, but,
and
he's part spider. So.
what else I thought looked cool in 3D, the way Electro sees the world.
Oh, yeah, that was
with all the
interesting.
ribbons of electricity running all over.
And that was
in
fascinating.
3D, man, they converted that. They did that perfect. Like, it looked great. Like the depth, and it looked great. That was awesome.
By the way, in terms of that actual thing, it's kind of funny because with how the Matrix shot it, they actually had still cameras taking frames in this. Here, they cast a lot of athletes, and we're like, they had them hold on to C-stands and anything else, and they were like, hold your breath. And so the shot took about 6 minutes to film, but they're like, do not move. You know what I mean? I'm sure there's other elements that they, they had to kind of make sure it did work. But in terms of, the heavy lifting of that moment, it was like, hey, can you just stand still for a moment?
That's great because so much rides on them just standing still.
Right. Yeah.
Not even standing, but like just mid-action. Like
Exactly.
it's one thing to just like hold the pose, but when you literally have to like, hey, can you hold on to
somebody
upside
with
down?
some good kinesics. You need to have some great body awareness in order to hold that. But it was very effective. I thought it was extremely well integrated into the film, and I thought it really elevated that whole sequence. Had you not had that, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as interesting. And I'm glad they were judicious with their use of it because it could have easily been overplayed, and they didn't.
No.
So I'm glad they had some
It
restraint.
fit within the mythology of this particular universe and Spider-Man, and I thought it was used awesomely.
And I also really enjoyed the flying sequences, if I can use that. I mean, the swinging sequences. I loved them.
They said some were going to be inspired of what Sam Raimi did, and then they kind of inserted new elements of that.
And I loved it. I thought
Their
they were
philosophy
terrific.
was steal from the best.
Yeah, well, but it was good. It was really
Yeah.
effective, and I was like, the first one we did, I'm going, I love this. I want to, that's why you want to be Spider-Man. You want to feel like you can swing between those buildings and whip around, and you got that little wish fulfillment. I thought it was terrific.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it looked great, and even the opening where the way that it starts off with the Spider-Man emblem.
Yeah.
And then when it pulls back and he's like,
Yeah,
and then when he's
and
chasing the truck, I
Yeah.
mean, that was a very great
Yeah, it's
sequence
wonderful.
as well. I mean,
Terrific.
again, all the action set pieces, they looked great.
Yeah.
Even, Gwen Stacy's death,
Yeah.
that scene too was amazing. The way
Yeah, I
that
loved
they
it.
slowed the time down, and Mark Webb said
And the
even
gears,
when-
you would lose her in the gears moving and
Yeah,
flipping,
and-
and then you'd see her, just the hint of her and following the little strand of
the strand of webbing.
webbing.
When Mark Webb was envisioning this, he's like, "This is what I want," and he was telling the guy, he goes, and I want it to come out in fingers. They did it exactly. They even took. He said that they took pictures of his hands so that when it came out, it looked like fingers desperately trying to grab on and go, and it was going through everything, and the way that the camera was going through all that, I felt it made it, the death even that much more impactful. But it was just so well filmed that you couldn't help but be engaged in that sequence. And
just the
was
slowing
awesome.
down. I mean, this is a weird term, but I think that's what they're going for. When it was slowed down and everything was happening, it was rather poetic.
Yeah, it was. I thought, and it looked fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even Spidey's fight with Electro, the final fight, and Spider-Man's like going in and out of the
And the towers and all
the
that other
towers,
stuff,
the columns, and everything. Like, again, slowing the action down to Spider Sense speed and seeing the bolts come after him and the way that he could turn around. I mean, it looked. They took great care in not cheating the audience and giving them what they want for a summer action blockbuster.
Yeah, I don't think technically I really have it.
Oh no,
I'm not as enamored of the 3D as other people, because every once in a while when they do the 3Ds, and I don't know that it really has the effect that it should have on me, because I just go, oh yeah, that's right, we're in a 3D movie, and it takes me out of the movie because I'm going, oh yeah, I have to move my head, and I don't know that that's the feeling that you should have, and it bothers me when that happens, like, because I don't want to be reminded in the middle of the movie that I'm in a 3D movie.
I enjoy when it's good. It's good when it's just like, oh,
It's a gimmick.
hey, here's Anatomy of a Movie in 3D. It's like, okay, well, Is it really that better?
That would be fun. I think it could be.
LA fans, come on by.
Yeah.
You can see us in 3D or in studio 4D,
But
if you count time.
I had a blast flying around the city with him. That was terrific.
Also, speaking of Electros, you were talking about the lights. In terms of actual Electro, they hid practical lights in his hoodie to give the illusion of the
Of him
light.
being
But,
in there. Yeah, that was nice.
So,
Good touch.
they knew what filmically they knew what they were doing.
Technically, tech specs were really good for this Spider-Man, and again, it also shows you too how far along special effects have come since the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. I'm not going to knock it for what it did because it was the first time. I mean, Sam Raimi did put the audience in Spider-Man's shoes, and we got to see great web slinging and stuff. It was great. But since then, the technology has become so much better that, it's great to now see directors using this in a way that, that they should be using it in, not just because they could, but they are using this and they can use it to great aplomb and make it so that it's good for the audience. It's not overkill. I didn't find that the action sequences necessarily were overkill, other than they kept on throwing villains.
Yeah,
the villain
that part,
overkill.
Yeah, like the climax is just
Right.
on and on and never really reached one with Electro, if you ask me. But and then the Green Goblin.
Right.
I agree with you on that completely.
You know.
And I just, I think what happens is, and this happens too often, is that the technology is really moving along so quickly that they don't spend anywhere near as much time, for me, fleshing out the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then the visuals take over, and then you go, yeah, they're great and all, but now it feels like you're just spinning plates because you don't have anything
Because you
underneath
can
it.
instead of should you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so for me, it becomes a hollow effort. I mean, it's great visually and it's all fun and everything, but there's nothing behind it. And you kind of, I come out of there going, wow, that was kind of unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing underneath. There's no depth to it.
Just something real fast. We'll talk about kind of where this is going. But in terms of do you guys know how Paul Giamatti actually got cast?
No, I don't.
Dimitri.
Please.
This is a fun little fact.
I go ahead.
His appearance on Conan.
Okay, I didn't see it, so which
okay.
one?
I read about this, but please, no,
Please
go ahead.
enlighten me.
Go ahead.
Well, somebody say something.
He was on Conan, and he was asked about who would you like to play as a villain, and he said Rhino.
Really? He's
Just
wow.
that's
Yeah,
it.
Okay.
and he wasn't even promoting the movie. He wasn't.
Wow.
He was a cast. Yeah, he was a cast in the movie.
I'd like to
good
play
for him.
Rhino.
That's nice. You have such pull. You can
Next
just
day,
name your
phone
role.
call. Hey, what's up?
Now-
you want to play Rhino? I hear you want to play Rhino.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like
Okay,
yeah.
that's
And it's funny
great.
too, though. He did say I read something this morning. He did say that he went way over the top with his Russian accent, and again, it just goes.
Which was fun. He says that was fun for him.
It was fun for him to do, but again, it just goes back to what we were saying about the Batman television series villains. Like, he was so over the top. Yeah, he had a great time doing it. Maybe he should have been saved literally for the third movie. It was just, there was so much going on.
Well, speaking of going, you have Felicity Jones as Felicia, Harry's assistant, and in terms of where we're going, we know Mary Jane's got to kind of come into the picture. The big debate is whether or not that's going to be Shailene Woodley with now everything she's got going on, Divergent and whatever else. But the Sinister Six and who does Felicia play?
That character would eventually become Black Cat.
Yeah,
she is a Catwoman-esque. She's a burglar.
Mm-hmm.
Catwoman. Yeah, in a sense, that is what she becomes.
And then in terms of the culture of these kind of movies, obviously there's a lot of debate about what happened in the movie and how well it could have gone. But then a week or so after, the debate always turns, where are we going? Where is this? And especially with Marvel movies, where are we
They
going?
always want to know what's next.
Exactly, and
They've got a plan out since till 2028. These things, right?
Well, this and X-Men are sort of kind of a little bit different. They do not necessarily fall within the Avengerverse,
sure,
so to speak. And These ones they map out separately because right now they're not entirely sure. Although there have been times, if I am correct, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, Spider-Man has helped out the Avengers.
Right.
But he's not necessarily a 100% member of the team. But these movies, for whatever, if you notice, these movies like X-Men is Fox, Spider-Man is Sony. They didn't fall under this umbrella in which they're all being released by Disney. So there's a licensing agreement. For some reason, contractually, Sony has Spider-Man, Fox has X-Men, and Fantastic Four, I believe. So where these movies can go is separate from where the Avengers universe is going to go and how it's going to be mapped out.
You have the whole thing about how basically everything is just tied into Oscorp. Yeah. And in terms of where you're going to go, even Felicia is Oscorp. She comes from, Absolutely. Everything just comes from Oscorp.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because is that a hindrance? Because in a sense, and again, I found you can go to blaster.com, and it basically this writer Matthew Jackson says how the Amazing Spider-Man 2 fails at shared universe storytelling, and he goes on in his thesis, and he's like, quick rundown. All the spin-off sequel premise thrown at us in the movie. We got Felicia Hardy, as you said. Black Cat introduced. Harry Osborn Green Goblin. Russian mobster. Oleski is out of the film in his Rhino armor. Harry injects pure Oscorp Spider Venom, which comes from Oscorp, to become the Green Goblin. Jamie Foxx, he's part of Oscorp. He becomes Electro. And to cap it all off, Harry Osborn and his mysterious ally, Mr. Fears, create Rhino as part of some kind of initiative to assemble a team of crazy people, give them crazy Oscorp tech, and turn them loose. Oscorp, it turns out, has the makings for Vulture, Dr. Octopus, and other classic Spider-Man villains just knocking around in the basement. Why, we don't know, but it sure is handy. And by the way, is another thing that we didn't talk about. This is what I call the midichlorian factor. This I thought was this bothered me a lot. Peter's father, while working for Oscorp, designed the Spider-Man Venom, which transformed him and specially engineered so it would only work on Peter Parker. It only works with his DNA. And it's like midichlorians and you introduce this where only certain people get he's the only person who's Spider-Man, and that's tied to Oscorp. And so if this pattern continues, we're basically set up to watch Spider-Man versus Oscorp forever and ever, unless they bring in Venom when he comes out of space. So I don't know. I sort of kind of agree with this guy after reading this. It almost appears as if they painted themselves in a corner.
Again, I don't know why you would do that.
Here's the thing. For me, is it the worst thing in the world? I don't mind it. You know what I mean? In some ways, we almost need that containment right now.
Well, I understand that, but then you can only go to those villains, and I think
that and Ravencroft.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess there's look, we already have these tried and true villains. We might as well use them. Maybe that's what they're thinking, but I just think that you can do more if you're not so tied to it, and I don't know that you need to be, because your main character is always going to be the guy that everybody wants to see anyway. But I think it would be interesting for fans to see him go up against somebody who they've never seen.
And wasn't necessarily tied into one entity.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a very interesting. I didn't piece it together until I had read that article. Again, something else that we can share, but I just found it interesting, and maybe I want to see how they paint themselves out of that corner, because they're going to have to eventually. We know we're going to get a third movie and most likely a fourth.
But even those
Sinister Six movie is going to be coming out too.
You have enough there. I mean, that's gonna take some time to get out of that.
Sure,
if it doesn't, if we just wrap it up in the first 30 minutes of the third movie, we got a problem.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, yeah. So, I don't know. Going back to the production side of things, in terms of audio, it was mixed. And Dolby Atmos now is like the big thing.
It was
ever see like the thing at the start, like, hey, Dolby Atmos. That's the rage.
It's Atmos. Cinemark's version of Atmos is Barco. They're another company. Theirs is called Auro. I've been following this Dolby Atmos for a while, like since its inception, and it came at a time when theaters had just finished converting, so they've had to get new silver screens, new digital projectors, and then Atmos comes along. And I'll be honest, I was going, geez, talk about fatigue.
Yep.
You know, especially for these smaller theaters. How can they afford, you know, you're talking about a 10 grand plus, you know, install into the theater.
How often? Every other year.
Right. And you got to rip out what you currently have. It's adding more things. But I got to tell you, Atmos has grown. It's becoming really huge. I mean, Cinemark has their Oro. Has anybody here seen a movie in Dolby Atmos?
I've seen plenty of.
Do they have it at the theater that you go to?
Yes.
They do. I mean, it sounds fantastic. You know, even this Aura with they have literally speakers in the ceiling, 11 points of articulated sound from the front all the way to the back. I mean, literally, it's sweeping. It is engaging. It draws you in. Like, Spider-Man can go from right to left, from north to south. It is an amazing thing as to how they do it. And mastering for it, you know, I've seen at the Technicolor sound stages in the Paramount lot, we do a lot of sound mixing in this Atmos form, and it's quite impressive to see how they have to mix sound for Atmos and then eventually Aura and all these different sound formats. Remember when THX was the big thing, and I'd applaud the THX logo. Man, have we come so far away from that. But anything that enhances that cinema experience.
Well, speaking of that, you know, tying in sound and the Six, there's Hans Zimmer and the Magnificent Six.
Yeah.
Who did the score for this? This is quite the Magnificent Six. You have people like Pharrell Williams, who's hotter, especially now. I mean, that happy song that's playing right now. You got Kendrick
you would have
Lamar.
thunk it won the Academy Award.
Exactly. Kendrick Lamar, Alicia Keys. There's a lot. You know, and Hans Zimmer. I mean, I feel like every other movie we do, Hans Zimmer.
He's
did
sort
the
of
score.
taking a break, though. I mean, Alexander Desplat this year has done a ton,
but if you notice, he's almost inventing like a executive produced music by
because he's bringing other people in. Yeah, and you would have to, because I would imagine you're so busy with so many projects, you've got to bring people in to help.
Yeah,
and why not?
What did you? Well, let me ask. What did you? I want to ask you, and we'll go into
replace James Horner, right?
What's
I'm not
that?
mistaken. Didn't James Horner do the music on the first one?
I don't know.
I think he did.
Well, I can check. But did you like the sound? Like, what did you think of the Atmos?
You're talking about music
experience? I'll talk about music in a sec. Yeah.
I mean, all of it worked really well for me. You know, here's what I will say: is as critical as we have been. You know what? It still was enjoyable. It still was fun overall. You know, and at the end of the day, if a movie's not terrible, you can have a fun time in the movie theater.
Yeah,
in a movie theater. Yeah.
You know, and this, but you know, I was it the greatest piece? No, but was it? It wasn't even in that like middle piece. It was enjoyable. And in terms of I thought mixing wise, it was great. You know,
oh my god.
It's almost like these scenes were self-contained in some way, right? So forget that editing-wise, perhaps story-wise, you know, they didn't all mesh perfectly well together. But I think, you know, when you take it apart and you know, scene by scene, do the sound effects, when you do the music, when you mix in the dialogue, you know, they felt very right. And, you know, had you take them out and we were dissecting just the scene by scene, it would be perfect.
Yeah, if we're talking scene by scene, and you are correct, James Horner did the first Amazing Spider-Man. I will say this though about the score of the movie.
It wasn't that memorable. It wasn't.
And there wasn't a hero's score. Like there wasn't anything that was identified with Spider-Man. I always love it when a superhero has
his theme,
something tied to him, and that was not. I couldn't find that here.
I mean, it's in that sense kind of probably like Hans Zimmer obviously did the Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy, and that, I mean, we could play any song off that track and you'll recognize it as the Dark Knight track.
Right, but I can also tell you that if I went dun dun Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, he did like Johnny Depp's Jack Sparrow.
Well, what I'm saying is him not doing the first one.
Yeah.
How do you know what I mean? How do you kind of go into that and be like, okay, well, what was initially there?
Yeah.
And
but I
now
think you
where do
have
go?
to. I think that's why I'll go back to this. Is yes, you want, because it's a trilogy, you want to keep some things, but you should have its own theme, its own feeling, its own sound, and because you're telling a slightly different story, and therefore you would want those themes to
I
help
agree.
move it along and to keep that energy as well as that narrative going in an audio way.
Yeah, no, I agree. Or you just, at this point, if you're hiring somebody new, and just reinvent something, but make it so that it is thematic and something tied into your hero, or a cue that lets you know that the villain is is coming, other than the rap music,
right.
for
And I don't know, maybe
like
there were
that
some themes I didn't get. They weren't anything I could latch onto. That's what I could say about
Same
it.
here.
I mean, the only one that we've actually talked to that we latched onto was was Electro's music at
and that was rap music.
Yeah. Which
Fair
was
enough.
kind of on the nose about, paranoia and all that other stuff. But
Speaking of electro music, as we kind of get to the end of things, there we go. We got some.
there it is.
Jamie, I love how, especially for these types of movies, the San Diego Comic-Con is just like
it's
such
huge.
a pipital point
You gotta
of marketing.
Go. If you
Like,
don't
if you
go,
don't
you're
go, it's like,
crazy.
Well, I mean, Peter Jackson this year, or was it last year or this year? I forget. He made a very specific choice not to go because
Right.
he sent out a video message to fame, like, "Hey, if you want me to complete this movie, I
Yeah,
can't go to
can't
Comic
go.
Con."
Right.
Yeah.
But obviously, with this movie, they the panel went. There's a great picture of Andrew Garfield and Jamie Foxx. What are we listening to,
What is
Marissa?
that? Marissa?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
What are you playing? See, this Marissa's just gone nuts in the booth. She's becoming Venom.
Comic-Con, not only Comic-Con in a sense can almost make or break,
Well, it has, for sure. Absolutely.
and when you have, this is what's great too, I
Because
believe, about Andrew
it starts
Garfield.
a year lead up time. I mean, for most movies,
Yeah.
this was pretty much, think about it. We're coming into Comic-Con season now, so you have a year to build up to the movie.
Mm-hmm. And but what's great about Comic-Con is that you get, and this is where you really see the true mettle of your actors. Somebody like an Andrew Garfield, like, really embraces this stuff. I mean, he's even gone dressed as Spider-Man. He's gone in costume, and to me, as a movie fan,
That would be
like,
huge.
That's fantastic. Like, when they embrace and they know that the
Like
fans
Loki
love
from
this. Exactly, like
Yeah.
Tom Hiddleston. When they embrace it, you're only endearing yourself, and it doesn't matter. You can play the villain like Loki.
Oh, yeah,
Then you
absolutely.
become more beloved.
Yeah.
And people love you, and they will seek you out, and you forever have them. Like,
And
you'll
let's
be
face it,
always
it's a
on their
great
side.
acting exercise, too. If you can maintain that and all that craziness, you can maintain that character.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a great acting
And
exercise.
but it's so long, but it also shows you're not uppity about it. You embrace the fanship. Hey, it might even mean you're a fan. And when you go out there and you have these,
you don't want to
panels
become
and-
like Electro, where like Spider-Man didn't like me.
no.
Well, isn't that why Garfield goes? Because as I've read, he has loved Spider-Man since he was 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
I can imagine and it looks like he's having a ball playing him. I mean,
Yeah.
what's to not like?
Right. And, this is what people stay in Hall H for, hours upon hours just to see, like, the one panel. And when you can deliver, and something like, Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man 2, hey, it's a great jump off point. I'm going to Comic-Con. I love Comic-Con. I had just gone to WonderCon not too long ago. I always love to see and hear about what's coming up. And these actors, so long as they give themselves to the Comic-Con world, then they've done themselves such a service.
Yeah.
You can't, you appreciate them that much more as actors.
Fan loyalty.
Yeah, it's fan loyalty. It really is.
It is.
And, with amazing, Spider-Man already has an amazing buildup of fandom. It's right now, though, I have to say that it is Sony's, or creatively, it's theirs to blow, because they haven't delivered movies like the first two Sam Raimi ones yet. And this movie did, this movie did 90
its numbers. It's doing
well,
okay.
but it did 92 million, let's say 91.6, 92.
Well,
so
what do
that's not nothing to
worldwide,
sneeze
it's
at.
like
Worldwide, it's
360
384.
Yeah,
But what do you guys think of the fact that there's projections as we head into for us as we're recording this, we're heading into the weekend.
Right.
We're about a week in, where it's going to lose 60% of that
Yeah.
money to Neighbors,
Yeah, I know.
Seth Rogen and Zac Efron comedy.
Yeah.
What is
But
it-
again, I think that has everything to do with the product that they put out. I don't think it has anything to do with Seth Rogen and Zac Efron's comedy. Had they put out a juggernaut that was just amazing, I think Seth Rogen and those guys would be sweating bullets. But they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because Rotten Tomatoes, when you look at Rotten Tomatoes, this movie got a 55%. But the cinema score was a B+, which is okay.
Yeah,
that means
it's
the
gonna
most
be fine.
audiences wanted it. What's going to be interesting when you mention Neighbors, I mean, it's Mother's Day weekend. I'm not entirely sure a rated R movie, even if it's really good, I'm not sure that's the movie they're going to take mom to on Sunday. Spider-Man's a superhero movie. I mean, I don't know how much it's going to lose. I can't project at this point. 60% is usually, it's sort of kind of the norm for this kind of a movie. But somebody help me with the math. What's 60% of 92? 38?
Yeah, you got
30,
it. You gotta get
something
close.
Around?
30, 32, 38. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if it drops to 32, that's a pretty big drop.
But I mean, many people are projecting this as the top grossing movie of the summer, according to like critics and whatever else.
Really?
Wow. Yeah,
Really?
AMC News.
Wow. With all the other things.
Yeah,
coming
because
down,
for my neck of the woods, Transformers, and believe it or not, boxoffice.com had an article about a week ago saying How to Train Your Dragon 2.
well, yeah, I can
Perhaps.
imagine
Okay.
that's going to be huge.
Maybe.
But nothing about X-Men, huh? They don't have-
X-Men not as number one.
Here's
like
the thing
we were
with
just
X-Men,
talking about.
because it's first class. It's not quite. I don't know how to explain it. I mean, hey, listen to every other critic out there
Yeah,
talking about
exactly.
this stuff and speculating which movie's going to be the number one.
Yeah,
But I
mean,
can see
all-
How to Train Your Dragon being huge.
Yeah, because right now, according to that article, it's like the only family
Yeah,
animated
that's what I
film.
mean. Exactly.
But Transformers, look, all the Transformers movies, whether you've liked
plus,
them or not.
plus it's got Wahlberg.
Yeah,
so.
plus it has Wahlberg. They're going a different route. As far as X-Men goes, so far, things that I've seen, X-Men looks like it's going to be pretty big. And the one that's sort of kind of behind it could be Godzilla. But as far as number one, at 92, listen, Captain America, I think, opened up at 95.
Yeah,
I know
it
it's
did.
only a $3 million disparity,
Yeah.
but what does that tell you? I mean, if you told
Well, in
me
terms
10
of
years
its
ago.
base,
Right.
Spider-Man is way bigger.
Exactly. And if you were to tell me like 5 years ago that a Captain America movie would beat out a Spider-Man movie as far as opening weekend box office, I would have said you're crazy.
And I
But-
can't. I mean, the only thing I can think about in terms of that is it's got to be the strength of that story and everything is just better. They
Yeah.
just executed it better because the fandom for Spider-Man is way bigger.
Yeah, absolutely it is. So it's
Anyway.
going to be interesting to see how this plays out. And we still have, listen, folks, we're in May.
Yeah, I know.
So summer's
2014. You got 50 more years.
They
of us.
started the season early. It's
Good.
good for them. They'll have more out there.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
So
But-
we've got.
I mean, this is I mean, in terms of what the movie season is, it's supposed to be May, whereas Captain America came out
Yeah,
in
exactly.
April.
Mhm.
But
They're
like this
extending
this
it.
is technically the first summer
Yeah.
blockbuster.
This kicks it off.
So,
But Captain America did.
Right.
they took,
But we still have so many
it'll
more
be
movies
interesting to
go.
see if we have any fatigue. Captain America, Spider-Man, X-Men. I mean,
Transformers,
it-
Godzilla.
It'll be interesting
Teenage
to
Godzilla,
see
Mutant
what kind of
Turtles.
fatigue.
Yeah, we've got
If we
Edge of
have
Tomorrow.
Guardians
We've
of
got
the Galaxy.
Maleficent.
But they've
Um,
done a really good job of creating this thing that you have to go to the movies every week.
Well, we've been doing that too.
I know, but
Anyway,
I'm-
as
I-
we wrap up,
yeah,
thank you guys for joining us. Yes, we will be discussing, I believe, all these movies. There's not a movie that we won't be discussing off that
Some fashion.
roster. So
Yeah.
So start saving up money so you can go to the movie theater. Definitely a lot of movies to see, and you know what? I'm excited. This.
I always get excited. My birthday comes up in a few weeks, and it was always like some big movie was opening up, and that's where I spent my birthday. My dad would take me to the Charles Theater in Boston with my friends. I was seeing like Star Wars or something. I love this season. Love the Christmas season. But yeah, I'm always very excited. Bring on Godzilla. Can't wait.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Hey, for those of you listening, obviously there's so much to say about this movie. There's so much to say about Marvel. There's only so much we can say and where we can go, especially in a certain amount of time frame. So, for those of you listening, definitely write, comment, let us know what you guys are thinking. Did you like it? Anything. Share crazy theories.
Yeah, that's I love those.
I know, and you know, I know it seems kind of one way at times in terms of us talking at you, but hey, right below, and you know, if you want to get a shout out, we do a show called Fans Q&A every Wednesday, so we address a lot of the comments that you guys do write in, so don't feel like you guys are just writing these novels and we're not taking it into consideration, because we do. And
tell us about the lore too, because there's something that, you know, a lot of these summer movies, like we just mentioned, this one, Godzilla, has huge lore, and X-Men has huge lore. Clue us in, because, you know, even ahead of time, because it'll give us more fuel, more information, and that's always great for when we take apart a movie. Dissect a movie.
That's right. So we'll see you here next Friday for The Neighbors, and after that, I believe we have X-Men. We've got a lot of stuff coming up, and
full plate.
Is this Alicia Keys, Marissa? This is Alicia Keys.
I
right?
think so. Yeah.
Yeah. This is the song that came out. # Spider-Man. All right. And on that note,
did anybody Shazam? Speaking of music. Did anybody Shazam the final
credits? Oh, that's right.
Credits?
They had a big thing. No, I didn't do that.
They had a big thing. No, okay. If you are seeing the movie this weekend,
Shazam the final credits.
Shazam the final credits, and you will get a glimpse.
It'll take you to a link.
Yeah, it'll give you a glimpse of the Sinister Six of who the characters may be.
Interesting. I did not know that. Maybe I'll sneak in real fast after I see another movie and just do that. Follow us at A Movie Anatomy on Twitter. Check out other dissections on anatomyofmovie.com. New ones coming out every Friday. Anything else you guys would like to put over? All right.
Whip.
On behalf of Dimitri Panos, John Comfort, Marissa Serafini in the booth, I am Phil Svitek. We'll see you here for the next dissection.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
Thanks for watching Anatomy of a Movie on YouTube. For more on your favorite movies, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to let us know what you think in our comment section below here. Bye.